Questions before we start today?
Are we gonna get on early?
No early possible today.
Okay.
Good question, but okay, anything else?
I can imagine the cost of going early.
What are my plans for the long weekend? I don't know, probably a little housework. Something real fun like that.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a little fishing.
Need any help?
Possibly. Need to, yeah, that might be an idea.
Are the due dates for the overhead
I haven't decided yet. That's probably the question I've heard. So let's just see how things roll. Ask me that at the end of the class. All right, so we got a few more things to wrap up.
Oh.
With oligopoly game theory is where we're going to start today. So, what's that? Chapter 15. This is still chapter 15 right now. So we're going to see where we end up going today. So how many of you are familiar with the game of chicken? The game of chicken. What is it? How does it set up? How does the game of chicken work? Kyle? Okay, so you're on bike. Were you on pedal bikes when you did this? Okay, so yeah, that's the idea, right? So you're both on pedal bikes. You can do this with cars too, is the story, right? Back in the 50s especially. And you basically straight at each other. And how does it work then for the payoffs? You drive straight at each other. Whoever turns first loses, right? That's the chicken. Right? So, and then of course, if you both don't turn, kind of both losers in that case, right? So let's model that with game theory to see how you should behave with the game of chicken. Everybody understand the game? All right, so what are your two choices? So let's put game of chicken here. The game chicken. So you've got two players here. We've got Kylo, and who else? Dylan, you were a chicken player, I saw. You had your hand raised? Or were you just doing it? Who else raised their hand for chicken? Savannah, you were a chicken player? You knew what was going on? Let's do Savannah here. All right, so what are your choices? Kylo? Turn or don't turn. Okay, so I'll live with that. Turn or don't turn. Right? And Savannah has the same thing. We can put turn or don't turn. So if you turn, you are the chicken. Right? You're chickening out. And if you don't turn, you're going straight. All right, so if you go forward and your friend chickens out, so this is our chicken here, the turn. So Savannah goes straight, Kylo chickens out, Kylo loses, right? So let's characterize this. We could put it in terms of a bet or something monetarily, but let's use the payoffs as just utility. So let's say that Kylo gets 10 units of satisfaction, and Savannah gets 100 units of satisfaction. And just the opposite, if Kylo goes straight, Savannah chickens out. So there's our payoffs. Now, if they both go straight, remember what happens? Boom, yeah, kind of something zero. They're both in pain, potentially personally injured, their bikes are trashed, the whole 9 yards. Now, if they both chicken out, they both at least maintained their bikes and their safety, but if they both chicken out in time, does that leave them, do you think, higher than 10 or less than 10? But so in between 0 and 10 or greater than 10 if they both chicken out? In between, greater than 10? So you're feeling kind of like the heel here a little bit, right? You chickened out, the other person won, they were the winner.
You're not a loser.
You're not a loser, so you're not down here, right? So with the game of chicken, we usually have something kind of in between those payoffs. So are you feeling better? Because at least what your happiness relative to the other, you're both chickens, right? It's not like one person dominated you, right? So the game of chicken is usually set up like this. All right. So what's the first step in solving some game theory problems? Check for Nash equilibrium or check for a dominant strategy, right? So what do you want to do? How about, let's go to, what do you want to do? Nash equilibrium or dominant strategy? Nash, let's do Nash. All right. Would Kylo like to change his answer, taking as given Savannah's not turning? Would Kylo like to change? Yes, because this is where the eyeball training, 10 is greater than 0. Good, right? So taking as given that Savannah's going straight, 10 is greater than 0. So is this a Nash equilibrium? No. Once you find that one person wants to change, you're done. So let's go up here now. Does Kylo want to change? No, because 10 is greater than 0. That's exactly what we just did. So we kind of know that one already. Would Savannah like to change? Yeah? No? No. So remember the whole, you kind of have to memorize the definition of a Nash equilibrium. A situation where neither player wants to change their mind, change their answer, taking as given what the other one's done. So would Savannah like to change her mind, taking as given that Kylo's going to chicken out? Would Savannah like to change? No, because 100 is greater than 20. This is the eyeball training again. Remember, the second position is always the agent up here, off to the right, kind of right-left. Kylo's to the left, Savannah's to the right. So that's how we read those payoffs. By the way, your textbook color codes it. I don't have the color. Well, I could be using colors, but I don't take time. They also kind of do this little diagonal thing. So there's different ways that you'll see that in your homework problems and test problems when you work on that. But so would Savannah like to change? No, because 120. So we've got a Nash equilibrium, right? Neither Savannah nor Kylo wants to change their answer, taking as given what the other one's done. Now, is it possible that this could be another Nash equilibrium similar to our battle of the sexes? Is it possible that this solution could be another Nash equilibrium? Is it possible to have two Nash, first of all? Yes. Is it actually possible for this one to be a Nash if we were correct here? It's not, right? So that's a little secret for you, assuming you didn't screw up. So you might want to check all the solutions. But if there is multiple Nash equilibria, they're going to be on the diagonal. They have to be, logically, right? Because that's why one person wants to switch. If they didn't want to switch going this way, then they do want to switch going the other, or vice versa. So this can't be a Nash equilibrium unless you screwed up. So you might want to double check it and just kind of read that. So, and we can do that pretty quickly here. Would Kylo like to switch? Yes, because 100 is greater than 20. So boom, it's not a Nash equilibrium. And then here, would Kylo like to switch? No. Would Savannah like to switch? No, because 10 is greater than 0. It's another Nash equilibrium. All right, so similar to what we saw with the battle of the sexes, where do we end up? Does the model help us kind of see where we're going to end up at all? Someone's going to chicken, right? So someone's going to chicken, someone's going to go straight, most likely. Now, that's not perfect, especially in this game under these circumstances. You know, maybe a couple people are going to chicken out too, but more times than not, our equilibrium strategy is for people to go straight, right? They're going to see that big payoff, and so they're going to head straight until they like can't stand it no more. Oh, I don't want to die, I guess. And they turn, right? So that's our Nash equilibrium. That's traditionally the game of chicken. All right, so now I've shown you, any questions on that? the setup. I just mostly wanted to motivate you kind of thinking through the payoffs. Anytime that we have the setups this way, we call it the game of chicken. So you'll see some examples in your text and in your homework problems where a lot of times they'll do a research and development thing. So with technology, do firms copy other firms? Did Samsung get a few ideas, do you think, from Apple after they busted through that? Yeah, right? So for R&D firms, a lot of times it's a lot cheaper and easier to copy the competition, more or less. You know, they can make they can't do it if they have it patented, they can't perfectly copy it. But a lot of times it's easier to copy your competition rather than to do it. But of course, there might be a big payoff in doing that. And so they'll work you through some strategic situations where companies might find themselves in the so-called game of chicken. And that's when the payoffs are set up this way. So what I want to note for you here is the name of that movie, A Beautiful Mind, that I talked about last time. We didn't write it on the board. A Beautiful Mind was the story of John Nash. And part of what made it beautiful was that this simple little 4x4 matrix has 74 different possible combinations of outcomes. 74. I've shown you 3. There's 74 possibilities here, and how it works was like another possibility. I don't think you guys do this on your paper, but if I change this to 120, that's another possibility, right? Now I've made this numbers bigger than this one, and so it kind of changes the payoffs around. And so there's 74 different permutations of numbers that could be bigger, smaller than the others of this little simple 4x4 thing that we could probably explain to a 6th grader on how it works. And that's part of what A Beautiful Mind is all about, that some of the most brilliant things that we have out there are sometimes the most simple things that can take complex problems and make them a little bit easier to understand. All right, so questions there? All right, so it's time for you guys to stretch your here. And we're going to play a game called, another example, of matching pennies. Matching pennies is the name of the game. Who's got some coins? I don't have any right now. Who's got some coins? Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. Doesn't have to be a penny. Any sort of coins. I gotta do a little example here. Find it? All right, what do you got here? I'm just gonna take, let's do your quarters. All right, so got 2 quarters. And here's how the game is played. Actually, let's just play together. So each person chooses head or tails without the other person's knowledge, right? So each person chooses head or tail, covers it up, and then on the count of 3, they're revealed. 1, 2, 3. And they don't match. She's got a tail, I've got a head. And so in that case, player 1 wins. Turns out I'm player 1. So I got the win there is how that works, all right? So that's the game that you can play with any size, but originally it was played with pennies. So I want you guys now to put that into a game theory framework like this, okay? And you can use Ashley and Russ as the agents if you want. And let's write out all the directions here. So 1, each player, each agent has a quarter. 2, each chooses a side without the other knowing their choice. Number 3, the count of 3 coins are revealed. Number 4, if they match, Ashley wins. If they don't match, Russ wins. That's it. So go ahead and that's all I'm going to give you is the instructions. I'm going to walk around the room and you guys can ask some questions if you have any about the rules. And then I'm going to randomly select, probably 4 of you to come to the board and share your work. So I'll give you a minute or 2 here to work on that. And Jackie or Hunzi, I'm going to pick one of you. You are going to be one of the. Actually, you'll be number 5. So make sure you're working on this. I want you to set up the game. I'm going to leave that up to you. Yes. So I want you to come up with the thing here. And away it'll go. So we're going to put. See, red, black. All right. So. Looks like Kylie, give me a number between, let's go 5 to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait a second, production. We got 4. I'm going to bring Hunzi or Jackie. All right. So come to the board, you guys, with your answer. So let's see, Jackie and Hunzi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hunzi, you're the winner. So once you're done, Hunzi, you hold your paper up and I will write it on the board for you. Put Hunzi's over here. Let's see, double Z. Triple Z? That is triple Z. I don't know if that's. Hunzi. Okay. Come on up, folks. Even if you're wrong, that's all part of fun. Let's see. Why don't we have? Let me get rid of the directions here. You guys can put all your.
Oh wait, no, you're right. Okay, you're right.
All right. Make sure just put your first name up by what you're putting.
Yeah.
Hunzi, you ready? Okay, hold it there, hold it there. 1, I'm just going to write whatever you've got. 0, win, 2, send. Okay, 2 coin. Does that say coin? Is that what that is? Coin? All right, you guys can grab your chair. Make sure your first name's by your thing here.
Yeah, just wait. Here. Wait, one.
There you go. All right. Okay, I forgot to mention there's actually an extra credit point on the line here for this too. All right. All wrong. Anybody else want to come up and give it a try? Volunteers. All of those are wrong. Yeah, extra credit if you can get it. So feel free to come come on up if you want to give it a try. Nobody's right. 1, 2, 3. Am I missing somebody? Yeah. No, but I meant to do 4 plus 5, so I did have to do one more, right? I just did 3 of you guys on here. But that's all right. I'll just open it up for. I thought I gave out 4, but I guess I gave out 3. Unless somebody didn't come, right? Everybody came up though. All right. Come on, it's fun. What do I have to do? Stakes 5 extra credit points.
No, raise some more. Come on. Raise some more.
Don't be bashful. We can, part of learning is being wrong. This is somewhat what's wrong with society nowadays. Is you got to take risks sometimes. All right, I'll give you a hint and I'll tell you who I think is most. If I had to grade these, boy, these are kind of awful, but if I had to grade them, let's see, I gotta remember my own rules here. So, I guess. Oh, okay, that one's up there. I mean, these are pretty equal. I think Eli, I would give you probably the nod here, barely, over Janice. So knowing that, does anybody want to try to improve Eli's? Let's think about the game again. I own a quarter. Ashley owns a quarter. Right? So let's really play it this time for real. I won't. Now that I've already pinned down who I'm in here. Okay, so ready? 1, 2, 3, go. They don't match, which means I win, right? And that's the outcome. That's the game. All right, come on up, Dylan. I'm looking. I don't want to reveal anything here. I really want to give some extra credit points away. If you want, you can just edit Eli's if you want. You can, since his wasn't. Don't. Yeah, there's eraser, whatever you want to do. Okay. All right. Grab a seat. No. Wrong. Anybody else? Not right. Not right. Actually, I think in some ways Eli was maybe a little more right, not quite. It's not too far off. So none of you have the payoffs right? I mean, in this case, what's the payoff? Okay, so we're talking money, right? So was this, I'm not sure if this was 50 cents or 50 units of utility or $50. Lance, you want to come up? Come on up. All right, thank you. Grab a seat. No. Getting better. I'd say that's a slight improvement, Lance. Good improvement. Yeah. Savannah? Hey, thank you. Grab a seat. All right, Kylie.
She got it.
Well, are we talking about utility? I just said we're talking about money, aren't we?
Okay. They match.
All right. Thank you, Grandma. We're really close there with Kylie. Kylie's really close. Nope, it had nothing to do with the names. The names are fine. So close, James. This might be the most people I've shot down on this thing.
We got it.
So remember, I have a quarter. Ashley has a quarter. We come together. We play the game. Oh, he's got it. All right, thank you. Grab a seat.
No.
I have a quarter. Ashley has a quarter. We meet, we play, and we look at the outcome.
Oh, okay.
Just do it. 0.25. 0.25.
All right, you're going. All right, might be onto something.
Okay, I didn't know which ones are where.
Okay, so if
You know what I mean?
in order for me to win,
Then that-
in order for me to win, they don't match. So it's a head-tail, right? Yes. Waited this long. I can wait 10 more seconds to get it right. And I'm actually not sure you're right.
I
so
know, I
just
gotta get
want-
the negative and positives right. I was
So
trying.
I lose if it helps.
Okay.
I lose if
If
they
they
match. So if it's
Okay,
head-to-head,
but-
I lose.
Okay, so it's head, and rest.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. There. I think we got it. All right. Yes.
You never told us that you lost the money if you lost the game.
That was part of what we did because Ashley clearly didn't have it, right? It's a bet. So what she lost when I took her quarter, she had one, I had one. We play, we lose. All right. So if they don't match, I win a quarter, right? I started with a quarter, so the payoff is Ashley's quarter, right? So I win, she loses. Okay, so everybody got that? Write this down on your paper, because now we got to think, is there an optimal way for Ashley and or I to play this game given that situation? Is there an optimal way to play this game?
What's weird?
Take it.
I wanted to.
Okay, so start looking for Nash Equilibrium or a dominant strategy. Let's do the dominant strategy maybe this time. Russ, heads, tails, Ashley, if they match, Ashley wins, Russ loses, and otherwise we got Russ winning. So, is there a Nash equilibrium? Or wait, a dominant strategy. Sorry, let's do dominant strategy. So, if Ashley plays heads, what would be Russ's move? Tails, because 25, right? If Ashley plays tails, what would be Russ's move? Head. So it's the opposite. So no dominant strategy. Remember, you have to be a strategy that you pick all the time. And then the same thing's going to hold for Ashley if we did it vice versa. So is there a Nash equilibrium? We can start with any of these payoffs. Would Ashley like to switch? No, because 25 is greater than negative 25. Would Russ like to switch? Yes. If that one's not, then maybe this one is. Would Russ like to switch? No. Would Ashley like to switch? Yes. Now this one, would Russ like to switch? Yes. There's no Nash equilibrium. So now this is the last, one of our last examples we're going to look at. So there are no Nash equilibrium. No Nash equilibrium for this game. And there's also no dominant strategy. Okay, so we don't get any insight there on where we think the game's going to end up. Now, if this was a repeated game, there might be some strategies that you'd want to avoid. So I'm gonna pick a strategy, see if you guys can pick it up. And more importantly, we'll see how Ashley does with it. So I have a strategy in mind of how we're going to play, and we're going to play an infinite game. We're going to play indefinitely until I say we're done. But that's not really fair. Let's play it 100 times. But maybe we'll stop early. Okay? So somebody keep track. Jenna, you keep track of how much money is being exchanged. Fake money, I might add. Especially playing 100 times. That'd be fun. All right. So, are you ready, Ashley? Okay. Are you ready? Sure. 1, 2, 3, go. They match, so Ashley wins, right? I had heads, she had heads. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Head, head, she wins. 1, 2, 3, go. Head, tail, I win. 1, 2, 3, go. Head, head, Ashley wins. 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 Right? What's my strategy? Play heads every time. Was that a good strategy? No. Okay, so we talked about mixed strategy equilibrium last time. What would be the optimal way to play this if you were to beat it 100 times? What should you do? Play it randomly. How so? Flip the coin. That's right. So with this game of chance, your optimal strategy turns out to be optimal for Ashley as well, is to play the game by playing a random strategy. Now you could do that by just kind of in your mind, I'm going to switch heads or tails every time, or you've already said to flip the coin. That would be one randomization device we could use. We could also roll a die. If I roll a die, 1 through 3, I play heads. 4 through 6, I play tail. Right? So you can pick any sort of randomization device. If you've got a random number generator as an app on your phone, that would be the optimal way to play this. Because if you played the strategy of, oh, I know, every time I get 1 or a 2, I'll play heads. But 3, 6 on the roll of a die, I'll play tails. If that was my randomization strategy, could Ashley potentially exploit that, take advantage of that? She'd start to see that tails are coming up more frequently than heads, right? So it turns out with this particular game and this set of payoffs, there's some math that we're not going to do in this class that is behind the scenes on this, but you can generate the optimal probability to play. And for this game, it turns out to be 50-50 chance is the optimal way to play it. In other games with different payoffs, if there was like a big payoff for this one, then you might play a disproportionate way in some way to try to capture the big payoff once in a while. All right, so that is called a mixed strategy equilibrium. So there's no Nash equilibrium, but there is a mixed strategy equilibrium. The mixed strategy equilibrium is to play heads 50% of the time. Play heads 50% of the time. One way you can accomplish that is to flip the coin. And that turns out to be the optimal way to play this game. This particular set of payoffs is known as a zero-sum game. I think I've maybe mentioned that in this class before, but I know I've mentioned it maybe in some others. I think I'm talking about it in personal finance. Oh, sorry, you guys, I never got this Zoom started over here so you can see the side of the board a little easier. All right. Oops, I'm going to mute this thing. We're going to start screaming. All right. This thing's called a zero-sum game. Why do you think it's called a zero-sum game? 25 plus negative 25 is 0. So in other words, what? How could you say that in a sentence? And that's correct. I mean, there's nothing wrong.
One loses 25 cents. Overall, there's a zero change.
Okay, good. So what one person wins is what the other one loses, is another way to say it, right? What you win is what I lose. And this is the thing that I've brought up before is not the case in most market transactions. With market transactions, we have in a voluntary market-based economy where two people come together and make a trade, it's a win-win situation, right? But a lot of people perceive this going on, even though it's not the case. So this is called a zero-sum game. Zero-sum game. What Russ wins is what Ashley loses, and vice versa, of course. The sum of the payoffs equal 0. So this is the payoff matrix, and with each outcome, each possible outcome, the payoffs sum to 0. Zero-sum game. All right, any questions there? All right, so we've done Battle of the Sexes, Game of Chicken, Prisoner's Dilemma. These are all kind of the famous game theory ones that you'll get some practice on. The last thing I want to introduce you to with the game theory is looking at a different way, the game tree. Oh, thank you. So the game tree is also called the extensive form game, and it's just a different way to look at the game. And it's especially useful when we get into sequential games. Here's how it works. We have Russ choosing to go with a head or a tail. And then we have Ashley at this level of the tree choosing to go with a head or a tail. And then the results are given at the end of the branches. So if it's head, head, Russ won, right, with, no, Russ lost, negative 25 and 25. And if it was tail, tail, Russ lost, negative 25, 25. If Russ had heads and Ashley had tails, Russ won, Ashley lost. And same thing if Russ had a tail and Ashley had a head. Russ won, Ashley lost. So these are the two ways that we look at game theory problems. One is with the payoff matrix, and the other is with this game tree format. And this one's especially helpful when we play a sequential game where I go, then you go. And you use what's called backwards induction if you have a sequential game. And we did that a little bit when we had our Coke and Pepsi. I think we played a little bit, well, what if Coke got to choose first? What would Pepsi do, right? And so you can kind of solve where you're going to end up in other cases by using backwards induction. So let me make just a few comments on this. Any questions on the setup? These are called the nodes. These little spots here, these are called decision nodes. Russ makes a decision, Ashley makes a decision, decision nodes. And of course, these are the payoffs. And the agents, so it's just a different way of looking at it. And so, this is especially useful for sequential games. Sequential games were the ones where I go first, then you go. And you can use backwards induction. Use backwards induction to solve. And that means you start at the end and work your way back up. So if we did play this sequentially, which really wouldn't make too much sense, we'd say, okay, so if Ashley gets to choose second, what would Ashley choose if I went tails? Which one is Ashley going to choose? She's going to choose tails, right? So that way I can say, this is the realistic outcome. This is the realistic outcome for me with the first mover advantage, right? So now I'm playing a sequential game, and so I'm thinking to myself, if I choose tails, what's Ashley going to do? Well, obviously she's going to pick tails. If I choose heads, what's Ashley going to choose? Heads. And so in this case, I learned very quickly, I'm screwed either way on this game. Right? So on a sequential game, I'm screwed. There's no way that I can pick one. But if the payoffs were such that this one was negative 125, right? I'm just changing the payoffs around. Now I've used backwards induction to say, what's my best choice as the first mover? Tails. I want to definitely go tails. Even if this one was, let me see here. If this one was, what am I trying to say here? Even if this one was Ashley getting 325 and me getting 225. If I didn't screw that up, which I might have, yes I did. All right, let me not try to. So the bottom line is, I'm trying to fart it on the way, but I'm farting around with too many things. If I change the payoffs, it'll allow me to see which one really isn't a choice, right? Because I know I would never get that big payoff anyway, because Ashley would never choose it, and her being in second position means that I need to really just look at this payoff versus this one. Okay? Questions on that? That wasn't my most brilliant way of displaying that. Questions? All right, so that we got one more topic here on game theory, or not game theory, in the chapter that gets away from this game theory stuff, and that's just to look at a cartel. It won't take too long because it turns out to be very simple. What is a cartel? What is it, James?
That sounds bad.
Sounds bad. So yeah, usually it's often associated with some bad guys. What kind of bad guys? Drug dealers, right? The drug cartel. So what does the cartel mean? What's going on with the drug cartel? Controlling, right? So there's a few firms and they work together. So the drug work, there might be somebody in the United States that's associated with the Colombian drug cartel. And so it's really like two companies that are working together, right? Because they might not own, that might be their source for the drugs coming in, but they are running independently. So a cartel is a situation where we've got a group of people acting together. So a cartel is an organization or group of individuals who work together. Which we call collusion. They collude or collusion. Good luck with the game. An organization or group of individuals who work together collude to maximize profits or some other objective. But if we're talking about a company, we're still back in the profit maximization. All right, so in many ways, this is OPEC. We mentioned drugs, but there's legal cartels too, and generally. So the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries is a group of countries that are working together to supply the world with oil. So countries setting quantity of world oil production jointly. All right, so what does that look like? Suppose we've got, let's put 3 graphs side by side, should hopefully get it together. And off to the right is the world supply of oil, the world market for oil. And off to the left, we've got Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. All right, and so the idea here is that on the world market, they're going to act like a monopoly. And so we've got our demand, our marginal revenue, and our marginal revenue equals marginal cost here. They get together as a group and they say the world quantity of oil to maximize profits is right here at big Q star. Same thing as our monopoly story. And then they're going to charge the highest price people are willing and able to pay, which is our world price of oil. The world price of oil. All right, so how this 100 barrels of oil gets determined, how do they separate it between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia? Well, it ends up being according to their marginal cost, which could vary potentially on how big they are and how many oil rigs they have and whatnot. So we might have the marginal cost of oil in, all right, put that up here. type. The marginal cost in Saudi Arabia and the marginal cost in, oops, don't have pineapple. The marginal cost in Kuwait. And Kuwait, or Saudi Arabia ends up doing 80 barrels. And of course, there's other members, but I'm just trying to do 2 here for simplicity. And Kuwait ends up having 20. So depending on their technology, they're going to be able to pull oil out of the ground at different rates. Kuwait, you do 20, Saudi Arabia gets 80, and then of course there's other countries that might be involved. But they allocate production quantities out to the members of OPEC. If the world price of oil is up here at $60 a barrel, that basically means the price of oil at 60 gives them some interesting incentives if they're currently at 20 and 80. What's their incentive to do? To produce more, right? So marginal revenue, every barrel of oil that they kick off, they could potentially get $60 a barrel. So the revenue generated by another barrel would be $60. And here their cost is down here at $30 a barrel. So each individual country has incentive to cheat. And that's what they do. They end up cheating. Long story short. And so they sneak off a couple little barrels. Saudi Arabia does a little bit of cheating. The other countries do a little bit of cheating. And as they cheat, there's more supply coming on the world market, and prices start to fall. Right? So a little supply and demand going on with the cheating. All right, so they agreed to oil production jointly, but each country has incentive to cheat and increase their little because the marginal revenue of an additional barrel is greater than the marginal cost. And despite the world supply of oil being controlled by the Middle East, if you take inflation into account, the price of gasoline really hasn't kept up with inflation. If you go over the last 40 years since the 1970s and look at the long-term price of gasoline, it's actually pretty reasonable. It hasn't gone up. It hasn't even really stayed up with inflation. And so one of the leading reasons that it hasn't has been this cheating that is especially prevalent early on. What else has happened real world in the oil, the supply of oil in the world? There's no world things going on. So cheating on the agreement was one thing.
Aren't we starting to produce more of our own?
Yeah, we're starting to produce more of our own. Why? What's that? Fracking. How many people know what fracking is? How many people have heard about it? Hopefully you've all heard about it, right? So here's the kind of the Russ McCullough definition. Here's Saudi Arabia. Here's the United States. Here's, if we slice the ground, there's Saudi Arabia's grade. This is on the Earth's crust, right? So there's the United States at grade, there's Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's got huge oil reserves sitting right below the surface so that they can pretty much put a McDonald's super straw and suck that stuff out of there. Whereas the United States oil sits right here. And so in order for the United States to pull oil out of the ground, they have to put in a big straw and suck down. And so it's hard for the United States to be competitive with the Middle East because the oil just happens to be positioned in a better spot. It's easier for them to extract it therefore keeping their costs low at the margin. The marginal cost of sucking the oil out is a lot less than us. So what fracking is, there's a couple things going on with it, but they are able to do horizontal drilling is another word. And so if they run the expense of bringing down a vertical drill, now they can take a left and suck off this straw too, and suck off this straw. And so now, if they spend the money to get down here through horizontal drilling techniques, they can suck off some other ones fairly cheaply at the margin, right? The marginal cost of hitting this one with this new technology is a lot easier than what it used to be. Otherwise, I had to drop another vertical drill in to get to it. All right, then the other technology is the breaking up of the shale rock, and so they're kind of going in and blasting out areas a little bit more. So there's oil that's kind of kept in frail pieces of Earth's crust. You know, some scientists think that maybe that's related to earthquakes now. That's a kind of a debate. There seems to be some correlation, but not necessarily causation of that, so that's still yet to be determined, but that's one of the things that's being investigated. But from an economic standpoint, the United States now is potentially competition for the Middle East because we have plenty of oil on our own. The North Dakota, what's the name of it again? Some of the, anybody remember that one? One of the largest oil reserves is up in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota. And so luckily there's not a lot of people living on top of the oil either. And so they're able to draw a lot of oil out up there. What this sets up is potentially incentive for the Middle East to keep prices low enough so that the U.S. doesn't enter the market, right? This is kind of an interesting thing that you'll see in this chapter called a contestable market. So sometimes we don't actually need to have companies enter the market to change behavior, but rather have a threat of entry into the market, right? In other words, if the Saudis jack up oil prices, the Middle East jacks up oil prices to $120 a barrel, the U.S. now, even though they have higher costs, can go start drilling again, right? And they can drill more vertical wells too, in addition to the horizontal. So it makes it profitable for the United States to enter the oil market. So one of the things that the Middle East is doing, and the countries that have the low-cost way of getting oil, is keep the world price low enough so to keep these guys out. The Saudis know exactly what it costs the Texans to suck oil out of the ground, and the people in Oklahoma and Kansas and some of these other, they know what the cost is, right? And so they can keep prices low enough so that it's not profitable for them to enter the market. Make sense? That's something called a contestable market. All right, so note. Oil prices are kept relatively low due to, number one, cheating, like we just said, and number two, having a contestable market. A contestable market means there's a threat of entry. A threat of entry. If prices are too high, it becomes profitable for high-cost countries, for high-cost countries to start production. Savannah, have you heard some of that in Alaska? Because that seems there with some of their mining that they do up there. But have you heard of that at all, or
Yeah.
that they're pretty sensitive to, depending on what the world price of oil is, that might start up plants or make them produce more? Yeah, it's a fairly common thing. And when you live in areas that are high producers, people tend to talk about that type of stuff.
Do you know about the Alaskan pipeline?
A little bit, but
Price of the barrel were too low.
Uh-huh.
It was actually, it cost too much money to keep the pipeline on, so they upgraded it to turn it off.
yeah. So that's another good example. So the pipeline, and they're looking to build more pipelines. Those pipelines aren't going to be profitable if oil prices are too low. So that's another type of infrastructure that's related to this topic with building of pipelines. And the big thing is they have to monitor those pipelines to make sure they're not rusting out and getting nasty, that they're going to cause a leak that nobody wants to have happen. So there is kind of a maintenance expense going on with it. All right, any other questions or comments there? All righty. That concludes chapter 15 for us. Chapter 16 is pretty short, actually, so that's why I wasn't sure. We'll see where we end up today. Chapter 16 is kind of our introduction into government, and in fact, I'm going to play a little video here that's going to get you thinking about public goods and government spending. So one of the reasons we have the government is to keep law and order. So that was something that was somewhat heavily debated, or one of the debate topics between Hillary and Trump. And so we have the government involved in the production of public goods. So this chapter we're going to look at missiles. What's the proper amount of nuclear warheads to keep in our inventory? Is it 5? Is it 100? You know, what's the optimal amount to keep, right? And so we're going to think about the goods that the government provides, those public, we call them public goods, and what defines them. And in addition to the laws of the land and the court systems and the police and fire department and that sort of thing. So we're going to first listen to a little lesson that was inspired by Milton Friedman here. 4 ways to spend money.
Money in the second person. You spend your own money on yourself. You spend. The 4 ways we spend money in the second person. You spend your own money on yourself. You spend somebody else's money on yourself. You spend your own money on somebody else, or you spend somebody else's money on somebody else. I learned most of this from Milton Friedman. When you spend your own money on yourself, you tend to be real careful about what you're spending as well as what you're getting. If it's a big item like a car or a house, you're going to shop around pretty good because it's for you and your family. You're going to negotiate the price. Now, when you spend somebody else's money on yourself, like when the boss is paying for the meal and he's not there, you might be more apt to pass on that burger and fries and go for the steak and lobster because you're not as careful about the money as you are about what you're getting. Now, when you spend your own money on somebody else, like when you're buying a present, you tend to set a budget for yourself because it's your money, but you're not quite as careful about what you get, especially if you don't know them terribly well. Now, before we go on to the final quadrant, let's take a quick look at the careful scale. You tend to be high on the careful scale when you're buying things for you and your family because you're an expert on what you and your family want and need. As you move farther away from you and your family in city spending, state spending, national spending, and world spending, you tend to be less careful because it's just hard to know what a family might want or need in another country or state. Of course, it's certainly obvious that we're all more familiar and understand our own countries better than other countries, our own states better than other states, cities better than other cities, and certainly we know our own families and ourselves better than we do others. And that's why we spend more carefully when our spending is closer to home. That brings us to our 4th spending quadrant, spending somebody else's money on somebody else. You tend not to be quite as careful about how much you're spending because it's not your money, and and you're not quite as careful about what you're getting. This tends to be the least effective quadrant, and of course, this is government. It seems year after year, politician after politician, Washington proves that they're the least careful in spending money because it's not their money, and they don't know the people and places that the money's being spent on. So it's a good idea to spend that money in more efficient quadrants in the form of things like charitable write-offs, tax cuts, or vouchers for school choice. It's worth asking yourself, what quadrant is the next big government spending plan going to be in? Now that you know the 4 ways we spend money.
Okay, so spending money. What do you think? You agree with the careful meter? That makes sense on how we're thinking about things a little bit more when it's spending our own money on ourselves versus others, and let alone spending somebody else's money on somebody else we don't know. So that's the challenge that our politicians have in trying to be good stewards of our tax dollars and what they spend. But to some degree, it's human nature to maybe drift away what might be ideal. So we're going to explore those issues. First thing we're going to do is define what a public good is. A public good is a good that is non-rival and non-excludable in its benefits. A public good is a good that is non-rival and non-excludable in its benefits. So we got a couple more definitions for this to make sense. I think it's easier to put it out this way. So non-rival is the idea that multiple people can consume the good at the same time. Right? It's non-rival, so it's potential that more than one person can enjoy the good without detracting from the enjoyment of another person. So more than one person can consume the good at the same time. It's possible for us to consume it, but it's more importantly than that, more than one person can enjoy it, and that person's enjoyment of the good does not detract from another person's enjoyment, right? So multiple people can enjoy the good at the same time. All right, so can you think of any goods that have this non-rival characteristic where multiple people are able to enjoy the good or service or what it is, and one person's enjoyment doesn't detract from another's? So, Jordan, what'd you say? Street lights. That'd be a good one, right? So street lights, the lighting that goes on, multiple people can enjoy that they can see their way without detracting from somebody else's enjoyment. Okay? I heard television. What do you mean? Explain that one a little bit more. Okay, so yeah, if you're sitting with your family in your living room, so up to a certain point, you can probably have 4 people, 5 people, depending on how big your living room is, depending on how big your screen is, right? So if we get as big as a movie theater with that big of a screen, we can have multiple people enjoying the movie. One person's enjoyment of the movie isn't detracting from another's enjoyment, unless they're talking the whole time, right? So I'm excluding that. But if they're actually just sitting there watching the movie, we've got this non-rivalness to the good, okay? So that's non-rival. Non-excludable is a different characteristic. And it means that it's hard to exclude somebody from enjoying the good, especially people who don't pay for it. That's what we call free riders, right? So non-excludable means it is impossible or cost prohibitive. It's too costly. It is impossible or cost prohibitive to keep a non-payer, that in quotes, somebody who hasn't paid for it, a non-payer from consuming the good. That's the one that we're normally worried about. I like to add the non-payer in there. At this point, technically, you wouldn't even have to add that. It's just basically we're saying it's basically hard to keep people out of consuming the good. It's hard to keep somebody out. But this leads us to the free rider problem. The non-payer is what economists call a free rider. But it doesn't necessarily have to be money. How many of you have had a class group project where there's been a rider, right? So that person's not paying, right? It's impossible because the group is going to be graded on the project, and the professor hasn't made any other sort of reservations for non-payers, and so 3 of the 6 members really do all the work, and the other one's free ride on, right? So the free rider concept works also not necessarily in a monetary basis, so free riders. All right, so a public good is a good that is non-rival and non-excludable in its benefits. Can you think of any public goods that have those characteristics? Any goods that the government provides that has that type of setup to it? Public what? Park. A park, yeah. So now are all parks, so a park is a possibility. What type of park? Let me drill down that a little bit further. If we're talking about the federal government currently, what type of park? Nature? Yes. Is there any parks that the government charges a price to get in? Like you can't get in unless you pay a price. All right. So there's some, but there's private parks, and then we've got Six Flags. That's a park, right? An amusement park. Now there you have to pay. So my point is a park, by just saying a park, is that non-rival and non-excludable in its benefits? You know, is it non-rival? Is one person's enjoyment of the national park, or amusement park for that matter, is more than one person able to enjoy the park at the same time?
Yes.
Yes, right? So it covers the non-rival part, but what about the non-excludability? Is the theme park, have they come up with ways to overcome this? Yeah, there's a big fence around it, and security, and so depending on the type of park. But if it's the national park or state park, are they able to justify putting up a 12-foot razor wire fence all around the 300,000-acre national park and then charge admission? No. It's cost prohibitive, right? In other words, not only would it potentially detract from the park, if you have the 12-foot razor wire fence going around, might not be the most appealing looking thing, but it doesn't make sense because people aren't going to pay the price that it would take to secure the whole border of the park, right? So it's cost prohibitive. So the national park probably falls into that category. The amusement park doesn't. So what we can start to do is think about these characteristics and build another 4-square box, but this one is not game theory, even though we just came off the game theory thing. where let's put the two characteristics of the goods where we have excludable, non-excludable, rival, non-rival. So public goods fall into the category of non-rival and non-excludable, right? And so some of those federally funded type things might fall into that category. A better example than even the national park might be national defense, right? So national defense, if we can all enjoy the protection we get from the bad guys, right? We have 100 missiles in our inventory right now pointed at places that want to potentially kill us, right? We're all able to enjoy that protection at the same time. My enjoyment of that protection doesn't detract from your enjoyment of that protection. So it's clearly non-rival and non-excludable. How easy is it for the U.S. government to say, hey, McCullough didn't pay his taxes, you can bomb the hell out of his house, but leave his neighbor alone, right? That's not real feasible. So it's not excludable. It's not possible for me to not enjoy it, right? But that, even if I'm a non-payer and didn't pay my taxes. So over here in this quadrant, national defense is probably one of our good ones. You mentioned the street lights. That's probably a good one too. The traditional one would be a lighthouse, though. And depending on the context of how we do the street light, that might work too. But a lighthouse works here. What does the lighthouse do? You guys have seen pictures of those. Maybe you've even visited some on the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And so boats can see what? Where the shore is, right? It identifies the shoreline. It might help them out there, but with that big beacon that's going around, the main purpose of the lighthouse is to identify where the shore is. And if we're out on the ocean, then we can't restrict people from being out on the ocean, right? So it's not excludable. That's why I picked the ocean, because it might be possible to exclude people from smaller bodies of water. But a lighthouse kind of serves this public good nature. All right. So where does the amusement park fall? Where does the amusement park fall?
Non-rival.
Non-rival, excludable. Good. So amusement park. Let's stick on that theme for a second. What other goods do you guys have that come to mind that fall into this excludable but non-rival situation? What's that? Pay-per-view. Pay-per-view. All right, let's think about that one. So pay-per-view is excludable. Is it excludable? Yeah, if you don't pay for it, you don't get it. Is it non-rival? Multiple people can enjoy it at the same time, right? So that seems to fit into that, right? Now, we might have to say the pay-per-view signal or whatever. We might have to define it. I know what you were saying, but yeah, the pay-per-view, we might be able to have that type of thing fall into that category. Okay, the movie theater, good. Public what? Public gyms. What do you mean? So like, and this is a good one, but like the YMCA or something, or?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? So is that excludable? Yeah. And can multiple people enjoy it? Now, does it have to be a public gym? That's what threw me a little bit. Or all gyms kind of work that way, right? Lifetime Fitness, so a private company. I'm actually glad you said a public gym, because some people think that a public gym is a public good, but it's not. Not in economics class. Why? You still buy membership? Not necessarily. Maybe there's one that's free to everybody.
You guys are selling the equipment that you want?
No, because the equipment might be to some degree excludable, and you're right, we can narrow down the use of it so specifically, but in general, multiple people can enjoy it. So that's not what I'm touching on, but it's a good thing that you're bringing up, because those are the items I want you guys thinking about. But why would the public gym, when she said that, it's free to everybody, the one in Ottawa here was that way when it first opened. It was open to the general public. So why does it fall here, even though in Johnson County, how many people from Lawrence do we got in here? Anybody in Lawrence? They have a huge rec facility. It's really awesome. I mean, it's enormous. It was kind of funded through KU, which of course is state income taxes, and Douglas County, the county system. So everybody can go there to use it if they want, if you live in Douglas County. Okay? What's that? Not, in some cases they could do that at different times, but that's not what I'm looking for. So even if it's free, the point I'm trying to make is, even if it's free, it doesn't belong down here. Why? You can stop people from using it, right? It's excludable. You might choose to not have an admission fee to it, but you could, right? So it's excludable. It's possible to exclude somebody from using it. That's a huge point. So I'm really glad you phrased it that way with public gym. Because lifetime fitness or whatever, we're kind of right back into the movie theater framework, right? So, but even if it's I'm gonna use this, Savannah. I'm gonna put public gym. I don't think I've ever done that before. It's probably worth an extra credit point because that's a perfect tee up for that. A public gym. Because one of the points I wanted to make was that many of the goods that the government provides that are free are not public goods. A lot of times, this is a place for the government to provide it, national defense. Because if we didn't have the government forcing you to buy it through taxes, would it get funded? Probably not, right? So we end up with this free rider problem for public goods. Oh, well, John's going to pay it. Oh, the rich guy's going to pay it. Oh, somebody else will pay it. Everybody's saying, pointing to the other person will pay it, and nobody pays it, and it doesn't get funded, right? So that's our free rider problem kicks in. And so through involuntary taxation, we often have the government in position to provide a true public good. But what's happened over time is that the government thought that they should start providing other goods too, even though they're potentially not truly public goods. So I like that you put the public gym on here. The public gym is excludable. And therefore, even if the gym is owned by the government, it doesn't make it a public good. So let's put on here lifetime fitness or private gym too. Both the private gym and the public gym are what economists call public goods. Does everybody get that point? Any questions there? Super important point with this. All right. Rival and excludable. This is what we've been talking about the whole time. These are our burgers. A cheeseburger is rival in the sense that Russ's consumption of that cheeseburger cannot be enjoyed by somebody else. Well, on YouTube, you might find something like that. Here, eat the cheese. Both of us ate the cheeseburger. I proved that the restaurant. Right? You could, but that's not the way it's designed, right? One person's enjoyment of the good, and it's done, right? So that good is rival. The beer, the chicken wings, all the stuff we've been talking about in our markets are often what we call private goods. So cheeseburger, beer, chicken wings, these all fall into what we call private goods. National defense, the lighthouse, these are public goods, non-rival and non-excludable. This category is a little bit weird. non-excludable. Rival but non-excludable. So let's see, what are some things that would be rival but non-excludable? How about air? Air. So watch this. I'm going to do something here as an example. Did I blow out air?
No.
Did I intake air? Yes, right? So clean air, the atmosphere, is something that's rival. But the amount that I sucked in, none of you can suck in. And when I blow it out, I've transformed it, right? So air is rival in terms of the mix of oxygen and whatever else I just inhaled. I don't know. That's for somebody else's chemistry class or something, or biology. So I sucked in something that we call air, but I do know, I remember from studies ago, what I blow out is what, carbon something or other? Carbon dioxide, yeah. So it's not quite as good that way. So it's rival, and it's pretty hard to exclude people from enjoying it, right? Non-excludable and rival. That's kind of some weird stuff. Ocean fish. Ocean fish. I'm kind of specifically saying ocean fish, similar to my lighthouse example. Why would ocean fish be rival and non-excludable?
You keep it from getting attacked.
If you're outside certain areas, you can, right? So you don't need anything. If you're deep enough out in the ocean, it's anybody's game. And what about the rivalness? I catch it, nobody else can catch it, right? I'm not doing catch and release, I'm catching and harvesting. So the ocean fish is rival and non-excludable. And so these goods are referred to in general as common resource goods. Common resources. The property rights are kind of tough. It's hard to exclude people. We can't identify, well, who owns the fish? Well, why don't they keep them fishing? And so they come up with rules with areas that are allowed. But that's about it. All right, so then up here, we have, there's different names for it, but a club good is what my major professor had titled those. A club good. Where you've got excludability and non-rivalry. Now, as you start to look at this list, what is the key thing needed for a market system, a free market system of people buying and selling to make each other better off, each person better off, right? Kind of a no government, if you will, kind of a free market system, Tom and Jen on the island. What is the characteristic that's key to allowing a market system to produce and consume, to have decisions on production and consumption? What's the key attribute that's needed? It needs to be excludable. Why? You're not going to get paid for it, right? You're back to the free rider problem. So as long as there's excludability, there's potential for somebody to make a profit on it, right? Now, part of what you need for that to happen is one of the key foundational principles of market capitalism, and that is property rights, the right to own something. Where do we get that from? Where does private property rights, your right to own this mug or your car or whatever, where do you get that right from? Possession, being big and tough and strong, or does some of the smaller people and weak people, do they have that right also? Because in the old days, you had to be big and strong. Some of you football players would have been in a good position to be a good owner of property, because you could beat somebody over the head silly if they if they took your stuff. But now, the meekest of the meek have that opportunity. Where does that right come from? The government. It really comes from the government that you live in, right? Do people in Venezuela, do people in Colombia, do people in Ethiopia, do they enjoy those same rights to property? No. There's nothing on the books, perhaps, right? And so it ends up being kind of this, whoever's the biggest and toughest, whoever has the right connections with the right people for the right protections, those people have property rights. But it's not through a rule of law. It's not on this law to where everybody in front of the law is treated equally. Whether you're Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or Russ McCullough, right? In theory, everybody who resides in the United States is subject to the same rule of law. Part of that law upholds private property rights. And so non-excludability and non-rivalry also belongs over here. So part of what the United States has as a public good is the rule of law. Rather than the rule of Obama, the rule of Hillary, or the rule of Trump, we have laws on the books that are not so transient compared to our politicians that come and go. So that we can live our lives knowing that we can own some stuff, sell some stuff, destroy some stuff. We have these property rights. And that then, as long as that property is excludable, it allows somebody to turn a profit on it, right? And that's why amusement park, pay-per-view, these are all companies, right? Or potentially companies. Again, as Savannah pointed out, the government might own some things, but it wouldn't have to. That was just a choice. That public gym is not a public good. It's just something that the politicians decided to spend money on. And so did it have to be that way? Now let's kind of push that a little bit further. Why is there public gyms when private gyms are out there too? What's function is it serving? What do we believe is the benefit? Or why not let the market? Because in general, I like to say, hey man, if the private company can produce it, get the heck out of there. We don't need you, because if the private entrepreneurs and owners are going to make much better decisions than Hillary and Trump on how much of this stuff we should have. I have much more faith in the profit and loss system to make decisions on the right quantities of stuff, the amount of private gyms, than I do in the politicians. But why might we see a gym owned by the government when it doesn't have to?
Private companies don't care about the small people that can't afford things.
Okay, yeah. So if there is a public sentiment that we would like young kids to have opportunities at age 5 and 5 through 10 to play basketball in a gym, and they grew up in a family that didn't have the funds for them to, we want that to happen. We've decided as at least a majority that would be a good idea, right? So that's part of these public good and voting decisions that come upon us in deciding where should we spend our money. But the fact remains that gym is still not a public good. It's just a good that the government has decided to own, right? And so we need to be careful when we have tax money or public money being spent on that the reason the gym is there is because the politician had some buddies that donated to their campaign, and so that particular location was chosen because their buddies lived close to it, and then their kids of the buddies could go to the gym. Follow what I mean? So we got to be very careful when we all agree that maybe that's a valid place and a good place to put our money. We got to make sure that it's not being corrupted somehow through the political system, and that's not always easy to do. Okay, so before we wrap, I've got some news for you. Gosh, I love the silence. That's when I got you guys right on the edge of your seats. I'm going to extend the due date to Tuesday, for this material. We will wrap, we're almost done, but we'll do a little bit more on it Monday. So I would encourage you all to get in, and you can work ahead if you want, but obviously we're done through the game theory stuff and still hit your homework problems, but I will bump everything up. Yes, so the test this weekend, Sunday, will be moved to Tuesday. Online people, sorry, that doesn't apply to you. You guys are going to be right on, and the reason is because we don't have lecture Friday, but in the online world, you guys are in a different parameter. So that is the reason. The rest of like this lecture, if you guys want to see me do it, if you go to Rusty Cox, my YouTube site, you can pretty much pick up where this went from the last time I taught it. There'll be another sequence, and you can kind of see. Just look for this part on the videos, and you'll see that you can kind of continue on with it if you'd like. Okay? All right. Bye.
When's the when are we going to get assigned that project?
It's assigned now. Why don't you ask me on Monday, and I'll bring it up. But it's not due until after we're done. So I put it as October 24th, but yeah. So we're going to meet till then, but I can talk about it to the class.
Yeah, I just want to know what to do for it, but exactly.
Yeah. So you can start finding a partner if you want to do something together. And so that's what I mean. Ask me on Monday so I can kind of explain it to the class. No, you don't. You do it by yourself too. Yep.
All right, appreciate it.
Yep.